So some of you might be asking, why would you actually want to lower your car like this? Well, let me give you a few reasons. Number one, it looks awesome. I mean, come on guys, who doesn't think that that looks cool, right? I mean, it just looks good. Cars with wheel gap don't look good. Adding a Tesla and getting it lowered and reducing that wheel gap makes it look a hell of a lot better. So that's number one. And the second reason why you'd want to do this is you're actually going to get better performance with the car. You know, if you're just driving around town, you're going to get a way better performance. And if you're racing the car or driving very quickly, you're going to get better performance then as well. This is because these particular springs feature a dual rate linear system. Basically what that means is that on the bottom, you've got a much tighter coiled spring, which when you're driving quickly, when you're driving around corners, either on the freeway or at the track, you're going to get much less compression when you're going around those corners. So as you get more G-forces pushing to the outside, that's going to help actually compress that spring less overall, so they'll keep the car tighter so you actually don't get as much body roll as you're going around those turns. And with the upper side of the spring, you're actually going to get a more comfy ride just cruising around town, right? When you take that Sunday drive, you know, it's not like the bumps are just totally gone. You're still going to feel the bumps, but with the normal suspension on the performance model, it's pretty rough. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, it's pretty rough. Like you hit those bumps and it's just like jolty, you know? And with these new springs, it feels a lot better. It just feels a lot more comfortable. You kind of get a little spring to the step, if you will, as you hit these bumps, and it just makes it a much more enjoyable ride. And the third reason that I want to mention is that you're actually going to get better range on the car. Now, I don't have an exact way to test this because it would be a little bit difficult without constant conditions, but it's been proven time and time again that when you have a car that sits lower to the ground, you're going to get less drag on that car as you're driving, and that's going to help increase the range that you get on the actual car. This is why race cars sit low to the ground, because they get better aerodynamics and they can go faster and further on the same amount of energy. So with all of those reasons being said, I mean, for a $430 investment and a weekend worth of my time, this is why it's worth it to do this type of install. Even if you pay somebody else to do it, I still think this is very well worth it because you get benefits of better handling just around town. You can take corners faster. It looks way better, and you're going to get a little bit of increased range on your car, which is, you know, going to pay itself off over the next 5 to 10 years I own the car. So all of that being said, that's exactly why I am so happy with this decision to lower the car. I don't know. I might end up going with coilovers to get it lower. I might end up putting bags on it. I'll have to see once the car's been out for a little bit. I'm sure that some of these other companies are going to start producing actual airbags for the car, just like they've got on the Model X and the Model S. I hope they come out with a version on the Model Y that is, you know, fully customizable, of course, not the one from the factory. I think from the factory, Tesla probably will come out with that on the Model Y, but I want one that's customizable. After the fact, I can get it installed and be able to, you know, basically slam the car all the way on the ground if I choose to do so. So anyways, guys, with that being said, we're going to jump right into the install. If you're actually watching this video to follow along with the install, make sure to watch all the way through to the end, because I'm actually going to share with you some tips about some of the issues I ran into with the install of this modification. So if you're working on your own Model Y, some of these tips will probably actually end up helping you out. And with that, if you enjoyed this content and you enjoy the look of this Tesla Model Y, make sure to give me a thumbs up here on the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about all things money, stocks, real estate, entrepreneurship, and that occasional Tesla video as well. Today we're going to be lowering the Tesla Model Y with the Unplugged Performance lowering springs. Now, if you don't know already about the Tesla Model Y, it does have a little bit of a rough ride, and it does sit a little bit high. So even though the performance comes with a little bit lower ride overall, I still want to get it lower than it is right now. I came from having a lot of lowered cars back in the day, and I can't wait to get back to that. So I'm hoping this will increase the ride comfort, and it will also give me a better looking car. So we're going to see if we can fit some spacers on there as well. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get those on at the moment, but that is in the plans as well. So with that being said, let's jump right into things. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to show you kind of some of the steps. We're going to get it jacked up, get it on the jack stands, and then start taking it apart. All right, so before we get this going here, I wanted to just kind of measure this out and see what it's going to be. Because I can't remember exactly how much this is supposed to lower it. So if I measure from the top of the wheel well, put that right in the middle as much as we can. We're looking at about 29 and just over a half inches. So it's about 29 and probably about 5/8, give or take a little bit. So that's what we're going to be reducing down on the front, excuse me, on the back. And here on the front, we're sitting actually a little bit higher. We're actually sitting just over 29 and 5/8 as well. A little bit higher than I anticipated. I thought the front would actually be a little bit lower from the start, but it's actually roughly the same. So that is what we're going to be starting at. And the lighting is not the best here in the garage, so you're going to have to bear with me there. But we're going to get started here. We're going to prop up the back. I think I'm going to start with the back. When I've done this in the past, that has been the easier option. So we're going to start with the back. All right, so we got this off, and now we need to get the strut and control arm released here. So we're going to jack this up, and we're going to take these 2 bolts out, and then this spring right in there should come out very easily. So, all right guys, so we've got the strut out and we've got the spring out. So this is our very first spring, came right out of there. Now it's kind of dark, but yeah, basically we just jacked up the control arm, and was able to take out those 2 bottom bolts that are right there. You can see those 2 holes. That's where the 2 bolts were at, and then we were able to release the tension and be able to get the spring, the strut out, and then the spring, the control arm just pushes down, and then the spring comes right out. So let's grab the new ones and take a look at those. All right, so we've got our coils right here, got our springs. These are definitely heavy compared to some of the other lowering springs that I've worked with. I originally wanted to get the coilovers, but unfortunately the coilovers are quite a bit more expensive. I think they're almost $3,000 for coilovers, and so I'm thinking, hey, first let's start with the springs, let's see how this works. And if I like them, then I'm actually going to probably go with airbags if somebody makes them. I've seen a couple other Model Ys that have airbags. I think they're custom built. Because I'm going to spend $3,000, I might as well spend a little bit more and go with airbags. So let's get this opened up and see what we have here inside of the bag. So I'm going to set this right here. Set up. So this is a beautiful spring. All right, I had to get some better light, so hopefully you guys can see this. This is a beautiful blue spring. I forgot my recording light at the office, but yeah, it's kind of got this navy blue look to it, and it's actually got these this little black, it's almost like rubber on here, so that when the spring compresses, it will actually prevent it from rubbing on itself. So it's kind of got that as like a barrier. It's basically kind of like a washer, I guess you'd say. So that is one spring there. Let's pull out the others and take a look at those. All right, so unboxing these here. So the springs, and these are for the front. So these are what are going to be going on the front. When we get to that stage and start working on the front, I'll actually you know, kind of show you more about these, but very much the same size, or the same design and style, just a little bit bigger. So let me grab the other spring for the back. All right, so you can see that this is the old spring here, and this is the new spring. And you can see that their coils are a little bit tighter here on these Unplugged performance ones. So the coils are a little bit tighter, and the spring itself is actually, looks to be a little bit narrower. You know, it's kind of this way. It's a little bit smaller this way than the OEM spring. And you can see that they're roughly the same size, but I believe once you get them under compression, these are going to compress under the weight of the vehicle, and that's what's actually going to help it sit a little bit lower. So you're actually going to see that compression happen, and I think that's going to help us get the vehicle sitting lower. All right guys, we just got the very first spring in, and we got the strut back in as well, and that was a little bit harder than it should have been. If you're watching this video and you're using it as a guide of some sort, you're going to want to know how this works. So the control arm here kept wanting to shift over here to the left, or excuse me, to the right, and so that was one of the things that was really giving me a hard time, is the control arm kept wanting to go that way towards the front of the car, and it was giving me a hard time getting it back up here to connect to over here on the brake caliper. I think the sway bar was possibly pulling it a little bit, but it kept wanting to go that way when I needed it to come, you know, towards the back of the car to be able to get the bolt back in. But anyway, so what I had to do is actually had to use the bottle jack that I was using for the control arm and actually put it up on a shim to kind of, instead of having it flat like this, to kind of tilt it back so that when it pushed up, it was pushing backwards a little bit for me because I couldn't get it to line up, but finally did. The next one will be much simpler, so let's get this one put back together and carry on. Very gently, if we can. Get that tire back on the ground. And let's see what we've got. All right, and there we go. So I actually put on these 3mm spacers that I had laying around from a previous project that I was working on. The thing about these guys is they're small enough, and with the Tesla, they've actually got on the hub here, they've got bolts on the hub, and then the nuts are the part that screw out. So that's a nice factor there, makes it a little bit easier. Luckily the bolts that are already on there are pretty dang good, and you can see that we've got a nice flush look here. So this is pretty dang close to the edge of the wheel well, and it's exactly the look I'm going for. So I actually really like that. Now I should clarify though, I'm actually not gonna leave these spacers on for now. I'm actually gonna prop it back up, take the wheel off, and take the spacer off, because I don't believe this area in here inside the hub, it needs to be touching a little bit more, and I'm just worried there's not quite enough contact there to make it safe. So I'm gonna need to do some research to see how that will work, but I mean, look at that nice flush look. So honestly, I wish we could get it a little lower, and I hope that that will happen once we get the other side done. But for now, that's what it looks like. All right guys, so we finally got the second set of springs on for the rear, and man, it's been a tough journey here. Been out here a little bit longer than I anticipated. We've been having some issues with the control arm wanting to go forward on this one. Had to do some sketchy work with the jack, but we're now a couple beers in and having a good time. So I need to get the bolts torqued back down, and we're gonna put everything back together for the rear, and that should wrap things up. We just need to tighten everything up once we get the wheel back on, and away we go. So you're gonna tighten up the top bolts on the strut first, and then you're gonna tighten up the bolts on the control arm once you actually have it back down on the ground under its own weight, so you can get it tightened at the correct angle. So anyway, we're gonna hurry and wrap that up, and then we will continue on with the front. I'm actually gonna be doing that tomorrow, and we'll get that knocked out. All right guys, new day, new springs on the car. We got the back finished up last night, and it's time to start on the front now. So we're gonna get the panels taken out from the front, and we're gonna get everything loosened up and then jack it up and get those new springs put in. All right, so easy enough. We got the front tub out. There's a couple of screws down in the bottom, down here, and then there's two in the front here that we had to take out as well. And that's it. The front comes out pretty easily, the tub anyway. So now we need to loosen up the suspension up here in the top of the wheel well. We just got the very first suspension assembly out. The shock, strut, whatever you want to call it. We just got it out. Man, that thing was a pain in the butt to get out, but we finally got it. It's kind of tight in there, and they got these stupid little clips right here. Those little clips on that wire. It's kind of hard to see, but right here, these little clips. These little clips are a pain in the butt to get out. Got a little damage on the thumb, but that's part of the process, right? So now what we need to do is basically take the top dust cap cover off, this piece right here, and once we've got that off, then we're going to use these spring compressors that we got, and we're going to compress the spring and take it out and put the new one in and reverse the process. We are ready to put the new Unplugged performance spring onto the shock mount. So we've got it compressed, and we're going to be sliding it right on there. We're going to put the nut and the dust cap back on. We're going to put the mount back on. Then it goes back on the control arm, and then back into the wheel well. It's night number 3 working on this project, and man, I'm ready to be done with this. This has turned into a lot more work than I first anticipated, but that's just the way this goes. A couple things I wanted to point out that's a little bit interesting. These springs here are actually the Unplugged performance ones. Let's see if I can get the lighting right. Are actually longer than the stock springs. However, the length of the spring is not always the most important thing. A lot of times it comes down to how strong that spring actually is, and how much it compresses under the weight of the vehicle, and how much it compresses when you hit bumps. So just something that was a little bit interesting there. Dealing with these spring compressors on these, you know, to compress the spring to get it onto the strut is a pain in the butt. Man, I don't know, if you guys are doing this project yourself, try to get like a high power drill so you don't have to do it by hand. Try to figure something out, because these springs are definitely tight, especially with the dual rate. Down there at the bottom, they're very tight, which helps for like if you're racing, going around corners at a high speed. It's definitely gonna help, so that's why it's like that. It's definitely good for driving, but it makes it a pain in the butt to actually try and get the spring compressor on there. So we're gonna wrap this up. I've already got one wheel done. On the front, we need to get this other one wrapped up. Unfortunately, the spring compressor I had last night broke, so I had to go get a new one today. And now we're ready to compress the final spring, get it back onto the strut, get the strut back in, the whole shock assembly back into the car, and wrap this project up. All right, guys, we finally got the 4th spring here on the front right wheel. Now it's time to take it for a drive, see how it feels, see how it looks, let it settle in, and get it measured. It's gonna take probably a couple days before the springs fully settle in, you know, going through some bumps, going through some high speed, low speed, stuff like that. But I think that after a little while of, you know, letting the car get used to it, I think it's gonna look really good. All right, guys, so we are now on day number 2 of driving with the new springs on, and wanted to give you guys an update and let you know how this feels inside the car. So the car definitely has what I would consider a springier feel as you're going over bumps and as you're going, you know, just driving over potholes or driving over manhole covers or whatever like that. It just feels a little bit more springy, you know. With the stock suspension, it seemed like when you'd hit those, it was really hard and it seemed like a jolt almost. Now when you hit them, it sounds like you just kind of get a little bounce. I mean, you know, it's not like it's an off-road truck. It's not like the you know, bumps just go away altogether, but it definitely rides a lot smoother now. We talked about the range being increased as well. I think that's gonna be pretty hard to tell. I do think it will help. I think it'll help me a little bit, and over the next couple of years, you know, I'll get some, you know, I'll be able to save some energy doing that. So I'm pretty happy about the range. Riding in the car, you do notice that you sit a little bit lower than you did with just the stock suspension. You know, it's not really enough to make a huge difference. I mean, most people probably wouldn't even notice, but for myself, driving every day and paying attention to it, it is something that I notice, and I can feel that I sit a little bit lower. It feels a little bit more like a car now, as opposed to kind of like the crossover SUV type feel that you get when with the Model Y when you're just like on the stock suspension. So a little bit of difference there. But overall, I mean, I love it, guys. I'm really happy with this. We're gonna have to see how the springs actually settle in and how much the overall drop actually is. But I was a little bit surprised when I first put the springs on and just took it for a quick drive around the neighborhood. It had only dropped, you know, really it was like a ½ inch, maybe just under a ½ inch at the very start. So that's the front and the back. The front and the back actually measured the exact same, but they had dropped roughly just under ½ an inch, even though Unplugged Performance says it'll drop up to a full inch. So we'll have to see how it is when it settles in. You know, the springs need to kind of loosen up a little bit, hit plenty of bumps, and I figure that it's going to take, you know, at least a couple of days, probably a couple weeks before they're fully settled and before we see the full drop. So we'll have to see how that actually turns out, but as of right now, I'm really happy with it. You know, I'm really happy that I did this. I think for most people, they would probably be happy with this type of change. You know, this is a really good change. If you get the performance model, there's probably times where you're gonna take it to the track or you're gonna take it on the freeway and really push it, you know, to the level that it kind of needs to be pushed at. And I think that you're gonna find increased performance with the body roll. You're gonna find increased performance just around town when you're hitting bumps and stuff. So I think for most people, for the cost, this is one of those modifications that most people should honestly consider.